When we picture Vikings, we often imagine tall, blonde warriors with piercing blue eyes, standing proud and fierce against the northern winds. This iconic image is deeply rooted in popular culture, shaped by countless movies, TV shows, and centuries of myth-making. The idea of the blonde Viking has become almost inseparable from our collective imagination, painting a picture of a people who were as striking in appearance as they were in their exploits. We see them standing on longships, their fair hair blowing in the wind, an image that feels both timeless and heroic, but is it truly accurate? This stereotype does have some roots in reality. Many modern Scandinavians do have fair hair and blue eyes, and Old Norse sagas sometimes describe their heroes with these features. These stories, passed down through generations, helped cement the image of the blonde Viking in our minds. But this image is a vast oversimplification, and it overlooks the true diversity of the Viking world. The Viking Age, spanning from the late 8th to the 11th centuries, was a time of immense movement, trade, and cultural exchange across Europe and beyond. Vikings traveled far and wide, encountering and sometimes settling among many different peoples. Vikings were not a single isolated group, but a collection of communities from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, each with their own customs, traditions, and even physical traits. To imagine them all as blonde is to ignore the complexity of their world. In reality, Vikings came in many shades, blonde, brown, and even dark-haired, reflecting centuries of interaction with neighboring cultures. Today, science, especially ancient DNA analysis, gives us a window into the real diversity of Viking populations, revealing details that written records and legends never could. By examining ancient bones and teeth, researchers have uncovered a far more nuanced picture, showing that Vikings were a blend of different peoples and backgrounds. The evidence challenges our old assumptions, revealing Vikings as a diverse, multicultural people whose story is written not just in sagas, but in their very genes. The truth is far more fascinating than the old stereotype. Vikings were a tapestry of cultures, appearances, and stories, making their legacy richer and more intriguing than we ever imagined. For years, archaeology and sagas gave us glimpses of Viking life, painting vivid pictures of their legendary voyages, battles, and daily routines. Yet, these sources could only hint at the true nature of the people behind the myths. We saw their tools, their ships, and their burial mounds, but not the people themselves, not their faces, their families, or their origins. The real breakthrough came with ancient DNA analysis, a scientific revolution that allowed us to peer directly into the past. In 2020, scientists sequenced the genomes of over 400 individuals from Viking Age burials across Europe and Greenland, assembling the largest genetic dataset of its kind. This allowed researchers to look directly at the genetic makeup of the people who lived during that era, unlocking secrets that had been buried for over 1,000 years. Extracting DNA from ancient bones is delicate work, often focusing on the dense petrous bone to get the best samples. This bone, found near the ear, preserves genetic material better than almost any other part of the skeleton. Scientists must avoid contamination at every step, working in ultra-clean labs and using advanced computational methods to reconstruct genetic profiles from tiny fragments. The result? A genetic map of the Viking world, connecting individuals from England to Russia, Norway to Ukraine, and revealing migration routes that spanned continents. Researchers could now trace family relationships, pinpoint ancestral origins, and even identify physical traits like hair and eye color, details once lost to time. The secrets of the skeletons were finally revealed, offering a direct link to the real people of the Viking Age. The story they told was far more complex than the old stereotype, showing a world of diversity, movement, and unexpected connections. The age of the genetic Viking had begun, opening a new chapter in our understanding of history, and it changed everything we thought we knew about who the Vikings really were. DNA studies have completely shattered the old myth of a uniformly blonde Viking population. For a long time, popular culture painted Vikings as tall, fair-haired warriors with piercing blue eyes, but the reality is far more complex and fascinating. While blonde hair certainly existed, brown hair was actually more common among Vikings, and shades ranged from light to dark. Some even had black hair, showing just how much variety there was. Eye color was just as diverse. Blue eyes were present, but so were brown, green, and even hazel. The Vikings' appearance was never limited to a single look. The Viking world was a mosaic of different traits, not a sea of blondes and blue eyes. Their communities reflected a blend of features from many backgrounds. This diversity makes sense. Scandinavia had been a crossroads of migration for millennia, with people arriving from many distant lands. Ancient migrations from southern and eastern Europe left their mark on Viking DNA, blending new genes into the population and shaping their looks. There was no single Viking look. Instead, there was a spectrum of appearances, each telling a story of ancestry and travel. A Norwegian might have red hair and pale skin, standing out in the northern light. A Danish trader could have brown hair and eyes, reflecting southern influences. And a Swedish warrior might have had darker features, hinting at even more distant roots. The DNA evidence lets us move past the cartoonish stereotype and see the Vikings as real, complex people. Vikings were a dynamic, genetically varied people, shaped by centuries of travel, trade, and mixing with others. Their appearance was as multifaceted as their culture, with every face telling a different story. Science now lets us see them as they truly were, diverse, adaptable, and ever-changing. The real Vikings were far more diverse than legend suggests, and their true story is only now coming into focus. To understand the Vikings, we must look at their origins. DNA reveals Scandinavia's deep ancestry: first hunter-gatherers after the Ice Age, then early farmers from the Near East. These groups mixed over thousands of years, forming the genetic base of Viking-age Scandinavians. But the story doesn't end there. DNA shows later influxes from Eastern Europe and even Western Siberia, making Scandinavia a zone of constant interaction. These ancestral streams weren't evenly spread. Danes had strong links to Western Europe and the British Isles. Swedes connected more to the east, Baltic states, Poland, Russia. Norwegians had ties to Ireland and Scotland. Even before the Viking Age, Scandinavia was a patchwork of distinct populations. The Viking Age began with several related but unique groups, each poised to expand in different directions. Their diversity set the stage for the era to come. Ancient DNA has revealed surprising ancestries within Viking burial sites. Some individuals buried as Vikings had roots in southern Europe or the Near East. These weren't just travelers, some were merchants, artisans, or even slaves who became part of Viking society. Viking towns, like Birka and Hedeby, were cosmopolitan centers, attracting people from across the world. The Vikings also brought captives home, and over time, their DNA entered the local gene pool. Eastern connections were strong too. Vikings who traveled the rivers of Russia and Ukraine brought back new genes. Even people from the British Isles were buried in Viking homelands, showing movement went both ways. These findings highlight the multicultural nature of the Viking world. The Viking story is one of constant movement and exchange. Their genetic legacy is far richer than we ever imagined. The Viking diaspora left a lasting genetic mark across Europe. DNA from Viking skeletons lets us trace their movements with precision. Norwegian Vikings settled the North Atlantic, Orkney, Shetland, Iceland, Greenland, mixing with local populations. Iceland's founders were a blend of Norse men and women from the British Isles, a mix still seen in modern Icelanders. Norwegian Vikings also left a genetic legacy in Ireland and Scotland. Danish Vikings focused on England and northern France, creating the Danelaw and leaving Scandinavian DNA in English populations. Swedish Vikings traveled east, founding trade posts and dynasties in Russia and Ukraine. Their genetic impact is still detectable in some modern populations. The Viking Age was not a single invasion, but a series of distinct, far-reaching movements. Their genes tell the story of their journeys. Viking longships carried more than warriors. They spread genes across continents. When raids turned into settlements, Scandinavian men married local women, blending DNA. In places like the Danelaw and Normandy, this mixing happened on a large scale. Over generations, the lines between Viking and local blurred, visible in both artifacts and DNA. Viking trading hubs were melting pots where people from many backgrounds lived and intermarried. Even raiding contributed captives brought home introduced new genes to Scandinavia. Conversely, Vikings settling abroad mixed with local populations, spreading Scandinavian DNA. The Longship was a vessel for human genes, constantly remixing Europe's peoples. The genetic legacy of the Vikings is one of movement and integration. Their story is written in the DNA of modern populations. The Viking story isn't just about raids, it's about settlement, integration, and exchange. Genetic evidence shows Vikings and locals built communities together, intermarried, and created hybrid societies. In England and Ireland, Viking settlers adopted local languages and customs, while also contributing their own. Scandinavian words, legal ideas, and DNA became part of English society. Women played a crucial role in Iceland. Norsemen often married Gaelic women, shaping the next generation. Viking identity was fluid. Being a Viking was about culture and allegiance, not just ancestry. A person buried with Viking goods might have been local or foreign, united by shared ways of life. The DNA evidence forces us to rethink what it meant to be a Viking. Their legacy is one of mutual transformation. The Viking world was defined by exchange, not purity. Their genes and culture spread far and wide. Ancient DNA has transformed our view of the Vikings. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed stereotype is a myth. The real Vikings were diverse. Brown hair was more common, and their society included people of many origins. The Viking world was multicultural from the start, shaped by centuries of migration and mixture. The Viking Age accelerated this mixing, leaving distinct genetic footprints from North America to Russia. Vikings were not just raiders, they were settlers, traders, and integrators. Their legacy lives on in the DNA of millions today. The movements of these peoples shaped modern nations in ways we're only beginning to understand. The true Viking legacy is one of connection, adaptation, and enduring genetic exchange. Their story is more human, complex, and fascinating than legend ever told.